Hello. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be sharing our tips and to-do lists to get us all through this ever-changing environment, particularly for the events industry and a lot of communications as well. Our events may have paused, but it certainly doesn't mean that our planning needs to stop. There's lots that we can do, there's lots that we'll need to do, but there are some exciting innovations that we can look to as we go through a period where events will be paused. So today I want to talk through about making that decision on whether you should cancel or postpone your event. And the key thing is to make that decision based on your event and your event only. Don't look at other events to what they're doing, but actually look at the impact on your event and how that will play out. So some of those factors that you need to think about obviously is when your event is planned for. Is it one that is planned for the immediate future? Is it one that's later in the year? And how that will affect your event. Looking at your numbers, obviously, so we know that the official advice is around mass gatherings of 500 or more. Does your event fall into that category? And even if it doesn't fall into that category, do you think your event is still appropriate to proceed? Can you put the appropriate measures in place to make sure that it is a safe and healthy environment? And would your delegates still want to attend? The next thing to look at is where your delegates are coming from or your guests are coming from. If they're coming from overseas or interstate, consider any travel bans that may have been placed on them due to the travel restrictions, or even travel bans that have placed on them due to their employer. So once again, you may have an event that's scheduled for mid or later in the year, but is it something that you'll still be able to have your delegates travelling to? Also thinking about where you're having the event. Is it an indoor event? Is it a static indoor event where your delegates and guests will be in close proximity? Or is it an event that's been held outside that you believe you can mitigate the risk due to arrangements that you put in place? Obviously, budget is a big constraint. So having a look at the current contract you have with your venues, chatting to your venues about cancellation or postponement. Financially, is it something that you should put in place now rather than wait a little closer to the date? Obviously, things are going to keep changing and we don't know necessarily what's going to happen today, but we can make decisions based on the information and facts that we have now. Some other things to think about, maybe you've gone through all the factors and you believe that your event is one that can proceed, but do the speakers that you have lined up, are they still able to perform? Do you have talent and musicians that need to travel to the event that perhaps have got a travel ban placed on them, which will impact on your event? So go through those factors, base it on your event and your event only, and then you'll come to the decision of, is it a cancellation or is it a postponement? If you are going to cancel, have a think of what those implications are to your delegates and guests, communicating to them, and these are for obviously ones that have already booked, what that will mean for their ticket, where they can get a refund, how that refund will be processed, the speed at which that refund will hit their credit cards or their bank accounts that they originally paid with. If you're going to postpone, have a think about when you're going to postpone to. If you're holding it at a venue, liaise with the venue about some viable dates. Is it something that you're going to push out to later in the year, or is it something that you're going to push out to this time next year? Even if you don't know the exact date, make sure you keep that communication with your guests and your stakeholders and your delegates and everyone attending your event, that they understand what the expectation is, and if it's something like we're still to determine a new date, but we're committed to bringing this event to you, stay tuned for more updates. So at least they have heard from you and that they do have an expectation of when they'll either be attending the event next or when they'll receive updated news. If you have an event that is going to proceed, make sure you communicate that to your database and your stakeholders. It's not just notifying those where changes have been made, but it's also notifying those where events will proceed. Perhaps it is an event that's later in the year and that you've deemed safe and that you've deemed viable and appropriate for it to proceed. Then let your guests and your delegates and all your stakeholders know that. Talk about the due diligence that you've gone through, talk about the factors that you've looked at, and talk about that at this point in time you will be proceeding, but we'll be monitoring the situation closely. So you've made your decision, you've put together your communication, And now it's time to get that communication out there. Think about who your stakeholders are that you need to communicate. Obviously you'll have your staff, perhaps you've got volunteers, you might have committee groups involved, sponsors, people who've already registered for the event, if it's a paid event, and obviously those that you've been promoting through to perhaps a database or social media. The last thing that you want is a staff member finding out about one of their events being postponed because they read about it on social media. Once again, you don't want a delegate to find out about a conference being postponed because they heard it from someone else through social media. So think about who you're going to communicate to and what that order of priority is. Now, it may be that you're running lots of events, but it's only this event that you've made the decision around cancellation or postponement. Make sure you communicate that too. Acknowledge that you do have a variety of events that are going throughout the year and that you will closely monitor those, but this situation and this decision is regarding this event. If you do decide that you will run other events, perhaps you've got small meetings or activities that you have once again deemed safe and a healthy environment, and you're promoting those on social media, make sure that you do put in the posts the due diligence that you've gone through. We've got to remember that everyone's reading the news, everyone's watching the TV, and it's going to be a little jarring if they get something on their social media promoting some upcoming seminars or upcoming conferences that look like they're being promoted in isolation to everything else that's going on around the world. So by all means, if you're still running events, do promote them, but make sure that you do put in there that you have gone through your due diligence and that you look forward to bringing these events to people. So that's a bit of a to-do list for today. Some of you may have started that process last week, even a couple of weeks ago, or some of you may be going through that now. So we wish you luck. As I said, there's a lot to do, but we will all get through it as we start to tick off those action items on our to-do list. So I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow and bringing you our next lot of tips as we go through the next few weeks. So stay safe, and we look forward to keeping in touch.